Hi there, everybody. I see we have a little over 40 people have joined us so far, 45. Welcome, everybody. My name is Tim Slade from the eLearning Designers Academy and community, and thank you so much for joining us today. I am so excited to have Ashley Chiasson with us. Ashley and I, you and I go back like, I don't even know how many years we go back, but we've been friends and colleagues for years and years and years. I think primarily through every time we've been at a conference together, we managed to go get dinner or go get a drink. So thank you so much for joining us, Ashley. How are you?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm good. I'm
Well,
good.
good. Well, so for those of you joining us today who don't know Ashley, actually, before you introduce yourself, Ashley, I guess I should point this out. I don't know if anybody this is their first time attending one of these sessions. So let me do some housekeeping items before I turn it over to Ashley to introduce herself. So with these, I hesitate calling it a webinar because there is no pre-planned content. We don't have any slides. This is totally a free-form, casual conversation. However, we want to be able to tackle whatever questions you all have about building your portfolio, your e-learning, or your instructional design portfolio. So you will notice in Webinar Ninja, where you're seeing us right now, on the right-hand side, there's a chat panel, and you, by all means, chat away, talk to one another. But there's another tab that has a little question mark, and that's the questions pod, and you'll see, you should see some notifications up there. So if you have any questions you want Ashley or myself to tackle, put it there. And then you can also upvote on other people's questions. If there's a question that you think you want us to answer, upvote on it, and we will tackle some of those popular questions. So while Ashley introduces herself, by all means, feel free to put some questions in there. I see we already got 7 of them going. So Ashley, for those of the people joining who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do for a living and all that good stuff?
So I'm Ashley Chiasson. I'm the senior e-learning developer at Treliant. I've been there for about 3 years now. I've also kind of worn a lot of different hats, working with the defense sector and then freelancing and then working in higher ed and then freelancing again. And so I feel like I've kind of been around the instructional design and e-learning block for a little while. And
Yeah.
I'm always preaching the necessity of a portfolio. So I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about, as I think back on the last 10 years or so that I've been working in this industry and doing conferences and stuff online, I think you were the first person that hit my radar who really started talking about portfolios in our industry. And we can talk a little bit about like because there was a time, probably when both you and I started getting active, portfolios weren't always a thing for e-learning designers and instructional designers, but it's become more and more expected and more common. So what got you passionate about talking about and promoting the importance of having a portfolio?
So I think for me, it was really just that nobody had one. They were kind of few and far between. There weren't really like a lot of good platforms for hosting portfolios. People
Yeah.
didn't really, what can I include in a portfolio? What should I include in a portfolio? All of my stuff is controlled goods or
Mm-hmm.
under a non-disclosure. What can I do to get started?
Yep.
And I think that was a lot of the feeling that I had, having been working with the military. I couldn't really share anything of mine. So then I knew that I wanted to make the leap into freelancing, and I didn't want to have to do free samples for employers or
Mm-hmm.
get overlooked because I didn't have a portfolio. So that's really what kind of drove my passion for kind of get my own done and then help
Yep.
other people get theirs done.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just did a blog and video this week about why people need a portfolio, and it's been an interesting how the arc and how things have changed in our industry with the need for having a portfolio. And I've mentioned this before, and I'll say it again. I think there was a time where portfolios were only for those doing photography or graphic design or fashion or something like a creative job. And then I think it transitioned to only freelancers in our industry had portfolios. And if you were, if you had a job or you were, just a standard full-time employee, I don't think there was a need for it. But there's been a shift lately where if you want to be competitive in our industry and taken seriously and rise to the top, you have to have a portfolio. Do you have any thoughts on like why that's changed or why that's become more common besides the fact that it's just what everyone else is doing?
Yeah, and so I think this might be just a Canadian perspective. So for those who don't know, I'm from Canada. And back when I was looking for freelance or remote gigs, they one of the issues that I had was that everyone in Canada wanted you to have your butt in a chair at an office. And so there there weren't as many remote opportunities. And then even when like the other side of the Canadian perspective is that no one really advertised instructional design or e-learning as a job or career path. And so there were fewer people, I think, applying to jobs at institutions or in corporate atmospheres. And so I didn't really have a need. Now there's, I think now there's a lot more people, like a lot more career opportunities and a lot more people looking for instructional design or e-learning jobs. In the States, there's full programs everywhere. We don't have as many of them in Canada, but there's a lot more education about what you can do, what career paths are available to you. And I think part of why portfolios weren't not as, I don't want to say as important, but why they didn't seem as much of a requirement was because there weren't that many people applying to certain positions. So you, like as a hiring manager, you would have to look deeper into people's resumes, spend the time interviewing, do all of that stuff. And I do think that hiring managers should still do that. However, it does really help you kind of, it helps you with your hiring in that you can kind of look through the resumes and then look at the corresponding portfolios, decide like, oh, you know, I think that person might not be the best fit for the type of work that we're doing. Or you might say, oh, well, they don't really say that they're doing X, Y, or Z on their resume, but I know that to build out this piece or what I see from this piece, they need to know some more advanced knowledge with the authoring tool. So you can kind of, a portfolio lets you kind of look in to the capabilities a little bit more. But I really think that it gives you a competitive advantage right now.
I think it's about everything that you said, I agree with. And I think it just comes down to two things. It's skills, and partly because I think so many of the tools, I feel like I'm on a record on repeat with this, because I feel like I just did a talk yesterday with the Kansas City ATD group, and I was talking about portfolios, and I said this to them is, you know, the tools that we use every single day now, Articulate Storyline, Camtasia, whatever tool you might be using to develop e-learning, they're so much easier than they used to be. And so anybody can create e-learning or create video content because you don't have to write code. And I think more and more employers have realized, oh, okay, these tools are way more accessible. And so they're expecting their candidates to have that broad expertise where, yeah, you might be focused on instructional design, but I also want you to be able to do a little bit of e-learning development if we need you to, and project management or needs analysis. And so it's about this greater focus on skills, and a resume does a really lousy job showing evidence of your skills. A portfolio is living evidence of your skills.
Yes. No, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot more that you can show a prospective employer when like visually than you can from, say, a Word document.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so let's go ahead and start tackling some questions. We already have 20 questions, and I see our participant count has doubled since we started. So just a quick note for those of you who have just joined us, we're going to be tackling some of the questions people have submitted. And if you want to submit questions, put them in the questions pod, and you can upvote on them if there's a question that you want us to tackle. So let's take a look at our questions. So I'm looking at the questions pod, and the question we have, it is not sorting by number of votes, but we'll take a look at, Kim Alley's question. Hi, Kim, and she has 15 votes, so we're going to tackle that one first. Oh, and then Dr. Sharon's here. Dr. Sharon, by the way, before we answer Kim's question, you sent the kindest note, Sharon, and I so appreciate that, by the way. I read that earlier today. Okay, Kim Alley wants to know, do you provide detailed explanations of the items and how they were created? So do you provide like a synopsis of in your portfolio about what it is that you're demonstrating? What's your thoughts on that one, Ashley?
I actually really like that.
Yeah.
I've done it with most of mine, but it's also a great way of, if you are unable to share. Okay, sorry, I'm going to rewind. So I think that's great because it kind of shares the insight that you had, like what you were thinking when you built out a particular project, and you can talk about what you did, why you did it, what tools you used, and kind of how you got from point A of like the initial conception to the actual build. So I really like seeing people's trains of thought. And then the other reason why I think that that's a handy strategy is because a lot of people struggle with not being able to share full samples. And so typically, if you ask a client, they might say, yeah, sure, that's great. They might say you can use some screenshots and a detailed write-up, or you could do a video walkthrough where you're doing a video, like kind of a screen share of you walking through the project and verbally explaining the detailed explanation. So I am very pro detailed explanation.
Yeah, I think there's, I've seen a couple different formats that people have done. If you were to go to my portfolio, I include maybe a paragraph of like 2 to 3 sentences saying what the project was. And then I outline a couple of key things in different categories. Like I'll say, what tools did I use? So I'll list Articulate Storyline and Camtasia or Rise. And then I'll say, what skills did I apply? Like graphic design, instructional design, needs analysis. And the reason I do that is it's not only an opportunity to tell a prospective client or employer about the project, but it also kind of has a strategic search engine optimization benefit that you can list all these keywords together and present it. I've also seen a few people take the more case study approach to their portfolio, where it's more focused on telling the story of the project than showing it. And I think for anyone out there, and I don't know if you agree with this, Ashley, if for anyone out there who really wants to focus on purely instructional design and less on like e-learning development, a case study approach I think is way more applicable, because you can go into more of the needs analysis, the strategy, the learning design, how you solved a solution and the results of it in a case study format, rather than trying to focus on how do I visually show my needs analysis, right? So I think it depends on what you're really trying to emphasize through your portfolio. Does that make sense? Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. I think because as instructional designers, you could share your design documentation and your course development plans and your needs assessment templates, and that's great. But I think a case study format would be a much more engaging way of illustrating the more dry documents that you may have been working on.
Absolutely. Good. All right. I hope that answers that question, Kim. Thank you. All right. Let's do, Sharon says 26 votes, Dr. Sharon Taylor. And Sharon wants to know, could you please show examples of an effective portfolio or e-portfolio and explain why makes them effective? We can share our screen. I'll be honest, I've never shared my screen on here before, or we can put links into it. Why don't we just, to be safe, let's just do links. I have a couple that I reference all the time, and I can put those in chat. One person's portfolio besides my own, and of course Ashley's, which are great. If you go to kathellis.com, Kath Ellis's portfolio is a really great example. And what I like about her portfolio, and let me just make sure we're still recording your answer, Sharon. What I like about Kath's portfolio, Kath is a freelance e-learning designer outside of, she's in Australia. And if you go to kathellis.com, what I like about her portfolio is she has she does a really good job of balancing quantity and quality. And one of the things I always tell people is you should always focus on quality over quantity first, even if you only have a couple examples. But she balances both really, really well. She has really high quality examples and a lot of them. Ashley, I don't know if you have a person's portfolio besides yours or mine, because we're biased, that you could put in chat or you want to share.
Her portfolio, and I mean, she's,
Oh, yes.
yeah. Oh,
I'll put a link in chat.
yeah, it's melslearninglab.com.
Mel's Learning
I really
Lab,
like
yeah.
hers because she is always kind of keeping up with the trends of different technologies, and she's super self-motivated to kind of get her own professional development expertise and kind of expand her, I guess, her development frame of reference. Like, she doesn't stick to just one technology. She does a lot of like JavaScript stuff and XAPI stuff. And so I really just like, and she also creates beautiful things. So I just like looking at hers. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I just put in chat. I fixed Kath Ellis's link in chat for anyone looking for it. I put Mel's in there. And then I also added Stephanie Harnett. I haven't talked to Stephanie in a long time. Oh, and Kath Ellis's website looks like it might be down. I'll have to let her know about that. Stephanie Harnett, if you go to her portfolio, I put a link to that in chat as well. What I like about Stephanie is that she actually built her portfolio on Rise, using Articulate Rise. And she used to do, she used to be in Storyline. And it's a really great example that if you don't want to build a full website from scratch, you can build it in a tool that you're already using, like Storyline or Rise, host it somewhere, and just redirect your URL there. The drawback to that is you're not going to be able to create a blog probably in Rise or Storyline, and you probably are going to lose a little bit of SEO, search engine optimization. But if you need something quick that you can just send a link to, Rise is a really great example for that.
I'm just digging through some other folks that I can't really, I'm looking specifically for their portfolio, so I'm trying to scramble here.
No worries.
Like David Charney, he
yeah.
is one of the hosts of the eLearning Brothers podcast.
Or the eLearning guys.
eLearning guys, sorry.
Yeah.
Not eLearning Brothers. And he does a lot of really cool work. He kind of does a lot of like things I wouldn't really see everywhere. So I like
one of his really good examples was, I remember he built like this really cool I think he has it on his portfolio. He did a really cool interactive, it was for a museum, and he built it in Storyline. I think it was Space Museum. And it was like, if you go to a museum and they have those big interactive screens where you can touch and make things happen, he built it in Storyline. It's essentially an e-learning course, but it's an interactive display, which I thought was really cool.
Another person that I actually really like their work. I'm going to throw it in the chat here.
I'm looking.
Chat question. Ridvan Slag.
Oh, yes.
Butchering his name, Seglam. But I know of him mostly from the Articulate eLearning Heroes communities. And he does stuff that kind of pushes the limits of the authoring tool. So years ago, he had created an interaction in Articulate Storyline that was like a side-scrolling video game, and it was the coolest thing I've seen at that time. I was like, oh, nobody's doing this, and that probably was such a pain in the butt to create. But like, what you would have had to do, because I think it was with Storyline 2, maybe. What he would have had to do with that on the back end to get it to behave the way he needed.
And I think it might have been before there were sliders in the Storyline or something. I saw that. That made me feel like I knew nothing about Storyline.
I know. I was like, I need that much time on my hands, and I don't know how much time he sunk into this, but this is cool.
All right. Well, I hope that helps, Sharon. We've been going back and forth on a lot of those. We put those links in chat, so thank you so much. Hey, for those of you joining us, by all means, I see some questions in chat. I've gone ahead and converted those to questions. There's a second tab up there where you can put your questions and upvote on them. So let me see what other questions we have. I don't know why it's not sorting according to most questions. Oh, here we go. I can fix that for myself. There we go. Okay, let's do another question, and then I want to talk about with you, Ashley, about, and there's probably a question in here about this, but I want to talk about the types of examples and whether, because we've been talking about a lot of examples people just create, like that game, versus actual work examples. But let's do this question from Georgette. Hi, Georgette. And Georgette wants to know, how many projects would you recommend including in a portfolio? Is there such a thing as too much? I have a thought on that, but I'll let you start, Ashley. I do think there can be too much, but go ahead, Ashley.
I also think that there can be too much. I mean, I like my general strategy would be include a little bit of everything. Nobody needs to sift through like 45 full projects to decide whether or not they want to reach out to you. But I would put things in your portfolio that are representative of your of a couple of things, of your competencies and what you can do within certain tools. And I think my other stance on that is including things in your portfolio that you wouldn't mind working on again. So if you had a project that you worked on and it was in, I don't know, I don't like using Captivate, so I know that I'm just not going to put Captivate in my portfolio, because if you put it there, people will ask you about that type of work. So it's one of those ways of, okay, I don't want to put those projects in there. I might have 10 pieces that I could throw in there if I wanted, but do I really want to work on those projects again in the future? No.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I see we have some people who love Captivate. Nothing against Captivate. You know, it's like Mac people versus Windows people. I'm a Mac person. I'm a Storyline person. And, you know, if you love Captivate, more power to you. I've tried using Captivate, but I started with Storyline and tried to use Captivate, and it's just totally different. So if you love Captivate, good for you. That's what I'll say. Here's what I'll say to that question. My thought on, can you have too much? So when I created my very first portfolio, on my online portfolio, I thought it was just like, I should put everything I've ever worked on in training on my portfolio. So I had e-learning examples, I had PowerPoint presentation examples, I had some graphic design examples, I had examples of like facilitator guides and participant guides. And then what happened was people started reaching out to me for that type of work. And I realized, oh crap, I don't want to be creating facilitator guides. Like, I really like e-learning. And so I realized your portfolio needs to represent the type of work you want to be hired for and what you're talented, where your talents and skills lie. And the way I put it, like the best way to figure out what your niche is to figure out what you're really good at and what you want people to pay you for. That intersection is your niche, and your portfolio should be representative of that. And so even if you only have one example or two examples, and after I stripped out all that crap from my portfolio, I think I only had like 2 examples for years. But it didn't stop me from getting work, because I think most hiring managers, most clients, they're only going to spend enough time to look at 1 or 2 examples anyways. And so even if you only have 2 examples, again, it's quality over quantity. Cool. Oh, go ahead.
You have more samples, or you have samples that say you weren't able to share on your portfolio. Those are always good to kind of have in your back pocket for if you get an interview and you have a hiring manager that asks you to show them an example of when you created a custom interface or did X, Y, or Z in a tool, and then you can show that on a screen share. It doesn't mean that you actually have to have it in your portfolio.
Yep. Yeah, one thing I've done, I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday. One thing I do is I have my portfolio that everyone can see online, but then I just made a simple PDF document with a bunch of links to courses that I've published to Articulate Review, and I just turned off the comments. Some of them are password protected because that's what a client asked for. And so if I have a client or somebody who wants to see extra examples, I just send them that PDF and I'm like, here's a whole bunch of other stuff that I've done that maybe it doesn't fit into my portfolio for whatever reason, but it gives you a good variety. So that's another option to give some diversity to what you're putting in your portfolio. All right, cool. Thank you so much for that one, Georgette. Let's go ahead and do another quick question, and then we'll see where the conversation takes us. So Elizabeth Huber, hi Elizabeth, and Elizabeth wants to know, I'd love to see a screen share with you pointing out good parts of someone's portfolio versus bad. Well, let's try the screen. Well, gosh, you know what? Here's what I don't want to do. I don't want to pull up someone's portfolio and then point out bad things about it. That wouldn't feel very nice to me. So let's do this. And again, I haven't done screen share yet in this tool, so I don't want to do it and then screw anything up. So we could talk about, let's answer it in this way, Ashley. What are some of the bad things you see in people's portfolios or negative things that people shouldn't do in a portfolio? What are your thoughts on that?
Flash, because
yes, that's a great point.
You're going to get some dead links.
Yeah.
This is really nitpicky of me, but I don't like, if you're going to put something in your portfolio, I don't like seeing an unpolished version of something. And what I mean by that is very easy things that you can laser in on with your eyes, like, oh, the alignment's off, or I've seen a lot of student portfolios where they've created like a capstone project and some of it had like typos or alignment issues and things like that. So I feel like if you're going to be including some small sampling, at least make sure that it looks good, it's in its finished state.
Yeah, I would agree. I would also say, don't make it, and this is less about the design of your portfolio, but don't make it difficult for me to find your portfolio. Even you were just mentioning a moment ago that you were trying to find somebody's portfolio, but you couldn't find it. That's an issue. If you couldn't find it, a hiring manager is not going to be able to find it. So if you have a portfolio, like link to it on your LinkedIn and your resume and everywhere else. I totally agree with you. Like if I'm opening someone's portfolio, my expectation is that it is your proverbial, I couldn't say that right, proverbial trophy case of your best work. And so you have to be super anal retentive that it is it shows the absolute best version of yourself and your skills. And so things like alignment issues, if the website doesn't look, I don't want to say not professional, but if it's just not clean and easy to navigate, then it's an indicator of your skills in general. The other thing, here's a really good one that I really don't like. I don't ever post, when I show my portfolio or I show an example, or even when I send a link to a real life working version of the course, it's really not the real version that I delivered for the client. It's a version that I've altered for portfolio reasons. So a great example of this is a lot of the projects I work on, if it's a compliance course, maybe that client required me to lock down the navigation. Well, I create a version of that doesn't have lockdown navigation, because if I were reviewing a portfolio that was locked down, that would really annoy me because I want to be able to jump around. So I get annoyed when I can't easily navigate the course, or if you get stuck in that endless loop of quiz questions where you can't like just move on, then I'm like, ugh, I'm done with this. I don't know. Thoughts on that, Ashley? Do you agree?
Yes, I've seen my fair share of locked navigation, and I do find that really frustrating. Another thing that I was just thinking of, and it's not really the portfolio, but it's the accessibility of the portfolio. So sometimes you're not, so there's two things here. Sometimes when you go onto somebody's website, if they're not actively looking for work and they just maintain a portfolio for their own personal development reasons, that makes more sense to me when you can't find their portfolio link. However, I think with all of the major platforms now, it's pretty easy to kind of have all of your primary links up near the top or somewhere very visible. Something that I've encountered frequently in recent years has been PDF resumes that have the URL pasted in, but it's not an active hyperlink.
Yes.
And so when you copy it, sometimes when you copy it into like Word or into Chrome or whatever, it copies it as special characters, and it doesn't actually, like, you have to manually type out their entire their entire link to get to the actual assets, and that's a little frustrating.
Yeah, whether you need to edit it in Adobe Acrobat to make that a clickable link, or when I used to maintain my resume, I'd build it in InDesign, and then I'd have to make sure to export it as an interactive PDF so those hyperlinks would work. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Well, good. Okay, so I hope that helps. Elizabeth, thank you so much, Elizabeth. Okay, let's do Brian's question. Brian has 13 votes. Brian wants to know where to host my portfolio. I have a menu made in Storyline that links to many examples, but where can I put and share with recruiters? So this gets into the technical aspects of hosting your portfolio, and there's a lot of different options. And I'll give my take on this, and then Ashley, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. It depends on whether or not you just want to have links to the samples, or you want to have a full website where you're hosting everything. If you plan on creating a full website and you want to host your examples in the website, it presents a technical issue where you need to pick a website building tool that allows for hosting on the back end. So for example, my portfolio is built in WordPress, and I host it on a managed WordPress hosting platform through GoDaddy. And I have access to the backend, so I can host things through the FTP. But that's not very, that has some technical hurdles for folks. You might go out there and you see people host stuff on Amazon Web Services, and I've learned that's not as simple as I think it's supposed to be. I've never done that. So what I've done is I realized, for me, I keep my examples on Articulate Review. And so I've stopped hosting examples on the back end of my website. What I do is I'll have the website, I'll have screenshots, and if I want to give a link, I just link back to Articulate Review, and I turn off the comments, and it's hosted there. That, I think, is the simplest solution for folks. Or if for your example, you have it built in Storyline, you could, if you wanted to, host that on Articulate Review and then redirect a URL to that on Articulate Review. There's a lot of different options. It's about what your technical acumen is with websites and hosting. I don't know. Thoughts on that, Ashley?
Yeah, so before you gave your suggestion, I was also going to suggest Articulate Review if you're using, obviously, Articulate software, because I do think it's very handy right now for sharing portfolio pieces. You could do a redirect. I also host mine on a WordPress site. So, but like you said, it's a bit more involved. Articulate also has in their community, under your profiles, you can now add portfolio pieces, which is great because they're basically giving you a free way of hosting pieces. You used to be able to share on Google Drive and Dropbox many years ago, and that was handy, but now it's a no-no. So yeah, I would probably go with Review as my recommendation.
Yeah, I used to, as a fun fact, before I knew how to build a website or host any of that stuff, my portfolio, I showed a screenshot of this earlier, and I'll post it. I'll actually post it. I'll mention this later. We have a free online community where we'll be continuing this conversation online asynchronously, and I'll post a picture of it there because it'll be easier for me to do it that way. Or I can pull it up while Ash is answering another question. My portfolio used to be printed. I designed this printed pamphlet in PowerPoint, and I took it to a print shop and I had them print it and bind it. And what I did is I burnt a bunch of examples, because you used to be, I think you can still do this in Storyline or in Rise, publish a CD and burn it to a CD. So I would burn all of these examples onto a CD, and I put the CD in the back in a sleeve of that little pamphlet, and that worked as well. I wouldn't recommend, like, if you handed somebody a CD now, they'd probably use it as a coaster, but or put them on a USB drive or something. But I don't know, most computers don't have those anymore either. So there's a lot of
Yeah,
options out
I
there.
remember. I remember going to one of your sessions, and you were handing out your little
Oh yeah,
pamphlet.
I passed
And
that around. Yeah.
in my head, I thought, man, that's way more involved. Like I feel like creating the physical copy and like doing the
Yeah.
CD burning and taking it to the print shop and all of that stuff is so involved. But it
But you
just
know
kind
what
of
it
goes to
does? You
show.
know what it did for me? It allowed me it allowed me to give something to the hiring manager that they could walk away with, and they might have it on their desk and they'll remember, oh, Tim was the cool guy who had the printout thing. It was a lot of work and it costs money to get it printed because printing's not cheap. But damn, that thing worked for me. So it was
Yeah, yeah.
involved, and it was before I knew how to build a website. You know what I mean? It worked.
Yeah, it's more memorable than a business card.
Yeah. All right, cool. Hopefully that helps answer that question, Brian. I'm going to scroll through some of the other questions. I want to see if there's one. I'm just looking at some of them here. Let's do, we're going to answer a question a little bit down the way. It doesn't have the most votes, but I think it's an important one. We haven't talked about this. This one comes from Shannon. Shannon wants to know, do you always remove client-specific content from your portfolio examples? I know you've talked a lot about this, Ashley, about, I think you used the word sanitizing a portfolio. Give your take on that.
Depends on what your clients, like the limitations that your clients have provided, because some clients may be fine with, yeah, you can totally share it, but I don't want you to know who we are. So then you have to kind of sanitize the branding a little bit. Or they could be the other way around where they say, I don't really care if you show the structure and how things look, but we don't want our content's proprietary. And so then
Mhm.
you have to replace the text with dummy text and things like that. Or I had an example once where we had got professional grade voiceover that wasn't like commercial broadcasting rights or whatever the usage rights were. And so what
Yeah,
I did was I pulled all of the audio and just replaced it with like AI
sure.
voiceover. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I mean, the first thing I always tell people is like, they go, well, I have proprietary content or it's for an employee. Well, I go, well, have you asked? You always have to ask, and you'd be amazed that, when I don't work as a full-time employee now, I do freelancing work, and I put in my contracts, all of my contracts that say I can show it in my portfolio, and I can count on less than one hand how many times a client has objected to that. Obviously, if you're working as a full-time employee and you're creating content, it's a little bit harder. They're more likely to say no, but you should ask. And then the other thing that I've learned, and this is kind of two things I want to say about this, is first, most of the projects you work on at work, and even projects you work on with clients, are not going to be portfolio worthy, not because of lack of your effort, but because the nature of a lot of the content you might create at work is just not exciting, and it's not cool and going to catch people's eyes. So the thing I always tell people is, create your own examples. And so if you have something really cool that you created at work, but you can't share it, well, take the essence of what was cool about that. Maybe it was a cool interaction or the way you designed some animations, and pivot it towards a separate topic so you can still get the essence of it in a different way. And so my portfolio, if you were to go out to mine, I have two examples out there that I just made up. I decided one day I was going to do a branching interaction on dealing with angry customers, and I literally have an example on how to cook a turkey. And the reason I built that course was because one year I decided not to go home for Thanksgiving, and I had a week off, and I thought, well, I want to practice my storyline skills. And I thought, well, I'll make a course on how to cook a turkey. And those two examples, oddly enough, I've won awards for both of those examples that I made in my free time at conferences, and those are the ones that always get me hired because they're cool. It has nothing to do with the content. It's about the development and the design, but that's what I want to be hired for. And the beauty of creating your own examples is that you're free from the pressures of pleasing a stakeholder or following a style guide. Like, if the sky's the limit, you can do whatever you want. And so you can be way more creative than you would be with any of your client or work. Would you agree with that, Ashley?
My samples I would want to share are ones that I've built out for myself and not for the purposes of
Yep.
a company. I did see somebody in the chat early on pitching out godesignSomething.co. And so they
Oh, yes.
have, yeah, there's
They have like
prompts
prompts.
there. And because I find people, whenever I do sessions on portfolios, people always say like, oh, I can't share my work, or, oh, I don't have the time, or, oh, where do I find inspiration? And so
Yep.
I would pitch that for some prompts, as well as, even if you're not using Articulate Storyline or an Articulate product, they have, there's over 300 challenges now. They have a complete
Mm-hmm.
list of challenges for their eLearning Heroes challenges.
Yep.
And these are really good prompts as well, because David Anderson always provides examples and kind of gets you up and running with a prompt.
Yeah, the e-learning challenges are a great way to not only put your skills into practice, but also build some real life examples that you can put in your portfolio. And I agree with you. There's a lot of prompts out there. Yeah, when you think about topics, I mean, the more if you take 5 minutes and like just really think about it, think about all the soft skills topics that corporations create, effective one-on-one meetings. Go find content on that and make a scenario on that, or hiring best practices or interview best practices, or how to cook a turkey, or somebody did one on how to. I was talking with a former a teacher who wanted to transition into e-learning and instructional design. This was several months ago, and one of the things that she was telling me about was how in her free time she would spend time on this website where you can create interior designs for people. Like, it has swatches for things. And I said, that's a gold mine of graphics. Use those graphics and create a simple little interaction about interior design or something. I mean, the more you think about it, the more creative you can get, and there's possibilities everywhere. And I think one of the things a lot of people get hung up on is they get hung up on, yeah, but it's not real content. How do I design something when it's not real instructional content? Well, if depending on what you're wanting to be hired for, the content could be irrelevant. I want to be hired as a developer who focuses in on really good visual design and interactivity. And so the content of how to cook a turkey, it doesn't matter. It's about the design and the development aspect of it. At least for me, that's the case. All right, good. I hope that helps. I think it was Sharon. Okay, let's take a look at chat, see what's happening in chat. I see people are putting a bunch of answers in there. We're getting some additional questions. All right, so let's do, I'm going back to the top here. Let's do, oh yeah, you pick one now.
No, I like Kimberly's suggestion in the chat of Google Cloud Console, and if it's a bit easier than AWS. I was just looking at that last week because I couldn't, one of my clients has a Drupal situation, and they couldn't figure out they don't have an FTP, they couldn't figure out how to upload their export, they couldn't figure out how to do iframe. So I was trying to find ways to host the content for them that wasn't mine.
Yeah, I didn't know Google had a service for that. Let's talk quickly, before we take another question, let's talk quickly about website building tools, because that's another important component, I think, to building your portfolio, is which website to go with. And I've been through the last year and a half, I've been through the ringer trying to figure out what was the right tool for me. And I came to a lot of conclusions on that. Do you have any recommendations, Ashley, on if you're wanting to build a more robust website, how do you go about picking the right tool for your portfolio?
Did this through trial and error. I used to have a very manual upload approach, and it's still very manual, but I use a WordPress plugin, and it took me some trial and error to find the best plugin for me. It is a paid plugin, and yeah, it's not super intuitive at all. I had to get a friend to help out with it, but yeah, I don't know if I have the best.
Is it for the theme of
No,
your
it's
website on
so for my
WordPress?
portfolio and my storyline tutorials, I use a plugin called Media Grid, and it looks really nice, but
Oh,
it's kind of a pain in the butt on the back end to do. So I feel like there's probably better suggestions within the participants here that
I
could
bet.
educate me a little bit.
Yeah, I I built my first website and portfolio on a tool called Adobe Muse, which was at the time like equivalent to Storyline for e-learning. It was like the first major no-code website building tool. And I eventually moved to WordPress, the WordPress.com version, not or WordPress.org. There's a difference there that it took me a long time to realize. WordPress.com is I don't know how the best way to describe it. You get a WordPress website, you get a theme, but you really can't customize it that much. WordPress.org is a more hosted, custom website building tool, and that took me a long time to like figure out. And I am not. Let me just say this for the record. I am not like a code person. If you asked me to like code myself out of a life or death situation, I would just succumb to the death of that situation. I can't code. So it took me a long time to figure out how WordPress thinks and how it's hosted and all of that stuff. Last year, I thought I wanted something that I could control more. So I started looking at some other websites like Webflow. There's another one called Duda, and these are again no code web design tools. And there's a few other people in the industry that I've seen use Webflow, but you really have to know how to think like a web developer, and that's not me. I've done also some evaluation of like Squarespace, Wix, GoDaddy's website building tool, and those are all really good if you've never built a website before. They're like building a Rise course. You can build a website in them. My recommendation, I guess, would be to pick something that meets you where you're at now with your skill set, but also has the features for where you might want to grow in the future. So for example, if all you need to do is get a quick page up and running, Squarespace, Wix, Weebly, the GoDaddy's tool, those are great because you can create a really quick website. But then start looking at all those other features, and like maybe you want to do a blog in the future. Does it have a blogging feature? Because what you don't want to do, what really is horrible, and I've been through this several times, is go with one tool that meets you where you're at now, but doesn't have any of the features in the future. And then you have to move your website. That's a pain in the butt, and that hurts your SEO, and that's no fun at all.
It's kind of, even if you can port over
It's
some
awful.
of the like some of the website, it usually doesn't pull everything. So you're usually losing SEO or your blog posts or your
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah, that's no fun. Okay, let's do another question from the questions pod. So let's do this one at the top here. Another one from Elizabeth. Elizabeth wants to know. That was not at the top, but I apologize. The scrolling's being weird, but we'll go ahead and answer it. Elizabeth says, I see a lot of portfolios that include design documents, outlines, storyboards, etc., that show process. How important is showing extensive process, just the final product, and a write-up of the process? I think again, I'll give my thoughts on this real quickly, and then Ashley, you jump in. Again, it all depends on what you want to be hired for. So if you want to focus in on design development, show those things. If you want to be hired for the instructional design, the needs analysis, the storyboard, maybe that's where you do the case study and you show those examples. It all comes back to, what do you want to be known for? What do you want people to see? And what do you want to be hired for? I don't include storyboards or anything like that because that's just not the focus of what I want to be hired for. Thoughts on that, Ashley?
I agree. It depends. What you show depends on what you want to be hired for.
Yeah, simple as that. So if you want to be an instructional designer, then show those things that showcases you as an instructional designer, and maybe that would be better as a case study format, so you can tell that story a little bit more. So okay, let me go back to the top. The scrolling was being a little funky for me, so I apologize. Okay, let's do this one from Carrie. Carrie wants to know, how do you pick which projects you display? Are there specific features you look for? Oh gosh, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that one, Ashley?
Like projects that I really enjoyed working on, things that I did cool things with, and showed those off. There was something, I just had it on the tip of my tongue and then I lost it. I don't think you probably would need a ton of redundancy. So if you created 3 different projects for one client that all have similar elements, I would probably narrow in on the one that speaks most to you, and what you did. I don't think you would have to show all of them.
Yeah, now that you're mentioning that, I didn't think of it from that standpoint. Yeah, if I were in my portfolio, I have storyline examples that show interactivity. I have one that's in Rise, and then I also show stuff that has like heavy animation in it. And so I think the big thing is showing the variety of your skill set is the most important thing. And then, like I said, should be the trophy case of your work. So the best of the best that you can put out there. And the other thing too, I'll say this too, it's not part of your question, Carrie, but I'll mention it, is that your portfolio is a living and breathing thing. It's not something you create once and then you're done with it. You create something, you put it on your portfolio, and then after a year and a half, after your skills had advanced, I mean, I'll tell you, when I go back and there's examples on my portfolio where I go, ugh, I need to get rid of that thing because it might have been cool 4 years ago for me, but it's not cool for me now. And so it's a living and breathing thing. So you should constantly, at least on a yearly basis, if you can't do it yearly, maybe every 18 months, every 2 years, go back and reevaluate what you need to pick and choose. It's curating your best skills. That's what I would say. Yeah. Okay, cool. Let me see what's going on in chat. I have to keep going back and forth between here. Just looking at this one question. All right.
Portfolio, the thing that I don't like about, or that I'm not fond of with those, is just the fact that you have to log in. And I've had some people also share pieces on StormCloud as well, and it makes me, I don't know, it makes me a little self-conscious knowing that some people have seen me looking at their portfolios, and then not a hiring manager,
Yeah, I
so
agree
I'm
with
not
that.
the person that would be contacting you. And then it kind of looks like, oh no, Ashley what didn't you like about me?
And yeah, and most LMSs, this is just my opinion, and I've seen I can count in one hand how many times I've seen this, what I'm about to say, be proven wrong. Most LMSs are not pretty, and they don't have a good user interface, and it usually requires a lot of hurdles to get into it. And then once you're into it, it requires hurdles to find the thing and launch the thing. Most LMSs are, I hate most LMSs. Nobody loves their LMS. That's the truth. So if you need it for hosting, if that's your only option, okay, make it as easy as possible for that person to get to that example. But even then, if it's just for hosting, there's a lot of other options out there that you could host it on. If that's the question, I hope that makes sense. All right, Ashley, you pick another question. We have about 7 minutes left. Let me do this real quickly. Actually, before we answer a few more questions, let me point out a few things. So next week, and I'll put this into the chat, you can click on it. Next week's webinar will be this same time and date on Wednesday. We'll be talking with Kimberly Go on getting into freelancing. So I put a link to that in chat. The other thing that I'll mention too is the eLearning Designers Academy. It's my online course offering for anyone looking to grow their eLearning skills, build their portfolios. Enrollment for that will open on May 4th. I'll put the link to that in the chat as well. You can sign up for the waitlist and get notified when that happens. And then I'll mention in a moment here about joining our free online community where we'll continue the conversation. So Ashley, you pick a question out of the questions pod that you want to answer.
Darlene is asking, if you don't have a website, where can you post your portfolio? When do you share your portfolio in an interview, in your resume? And for that one, I think if you have a portfolio that you're not listing it on your website, I think loud and proud in your resume I see a lot of people putting it underneath their name or in the header or footer. I think somewhere very easily accessible in your resume.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And
Yeah, I don't have
then,
anything else to add to that.
yeah,
That's a simple one. Yeah.
Shannon.
Just make it simple, make it easy.
Shannon saying, how much of your portfolio should you lock down with a password? From my perspective, only the items that are required to be password protected. Like if you have a client, like Tim was saying, he's got some clients that have requested a password protected portfolio piece.
Yeah.
That's when and where I would do it.
Yeah, I've had a few clients request a password, and it'll usually be if I create that PDF and I send it out, I make it really clear, please don't share this, and there's a little bit of honor system happening there. But when in doubt, if you can not lock it down, I would err on the side of not locking it down. Don't add barriers to entry. The more barriers to entry you add, the hard, because here I'll say this from the hiring manager standpoint. I used to hire instructional designers and e-learning designers before I started my own business. And two things I'll say to you about this, or to everybody about this. Most hiring managers receive hundreds of applications for job postings, and I would say 80% of them are people who are just submitting to every job that opens up on Monster. They might have been the barista at Starbucks wanting to become the director of e-learning, or you know what I mean? Like, you get nothing wrong with baristas at Starbucks. I love my barista at Starbucks down the way. But you get a lot of people who are clearly not qualified for the job, and they're just submitting their resume to everything possible. And it's a lot of work for hiring managers to sift through all that. The other thing that I'll say, and I'm talking about barriers of entry here, the other thing that I'll say is you'll be amazed at the number of people who don't submit or don't have portfolios. And it's so easy. It's like the easiest. It's not necessarily easy, but it's the one thing you can do that will make you rise above the rest of the people, even if they're incredibly qualified. As a hiring manager, and Ashley, I know you've hired people where you work. The first thing I look for is, do they have a portfolio? And if they don't have a portfolio, not that I'm going to discount them, but I'm going to spend more of my time looking at the people who do have a portfolio. That's just the matter of the fact. And it kind of goes back to, people are hiring for skills now. People aren't hiring necessarily because of credentials. They're hiring for skills. And if you don't have a portfolio, then I don't know if I would want to risk and waste my time trying to figure out if you have those skills. I want to see it. Would you agree with
Yeah,
that? I know that sounds harsh. I don't want it to sound harsh.
No, I agree. I think I mentioned it earlier in the chat that I think it's a lot easier to overlook people who, when you're just looking at a Word document versus looking at a tangible portfolio piece.
Yep.
And you brought up a good point about credentials, because a lot of people in the subreddit, the instructional design subreddit, they're always asking like, oh, does a degree matter? Do I need a degree? And this isn't really from a portfolio standpoint, but I find that more corporate roles appreciate the portfolio.
Yep.
Over, like, you could have a PhD and you may get overlooked for a development position, just because that's not something that's as important to them. Whereas having worked in higher ed and the defense sector, both of those industries very appreciate actual credentials and degrees much more.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It doesn't mean that either one of those makes you better at your job, but
yeah, it's about skills. All right, we are down to our last minute and a half. Here's what I'm going to say. There were tons of questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, so I apologize if we didn't get to all of your answers. So here's what we're going to do. I've been thinking over the last several weeks how to allow us to continue this conversation asynchronously and allow everybody here today to learn from one another. So I'm going to invite you all to join our online community. It's the eLearning Designers community. It's 100% free. Sign up and you get access to all of these other great people here. And there is a specific thread in there where Ashley will continue, Ashley, myself, and anyone else can continue answering your questions. So I've put a link to that directly to the thread where we will continue answering the questions today and into the future. So feel free to sign up for that. Again, it's free. It's meant to be a free resource to help anybody connect, network with one another. Ashley, well, let's say this. Ashley, where can people find you if they want to connect with you and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so ashleychiasson.com is my website, and you can find me there. You can find me on YouTube if you're looking for, I post mostly articulate storyline tutorials. I think there's over 100 on there.
You do a lot of that.
Yeah, so if you're looking for free storyline tutorials, search me on YouTube. You'll find me there. LinkedIn, Ashley Chiasson, and I'm on Twitter at AMDChiasson.
Awesome. And it's Chiasson, not Chiasson. That's what I used to say. I was like, oh, Ashley Chiasson.
I'll take anything.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, good. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Ashley. And thank you, everyone else who decided to join us today. And enjoy the rest of your week, everybody. Bye.
Yes, thank you all.
Bye.